Welcome back, everybody, here on Post Wrestling. It is John Pollock, and returning to the show for the second time in a very short window. Oh, look at this. We have multiple guests joining us. We have Chris Hero here to chat with us about this week's West Coast Pro shows, and there maybe a secret entrant into the tournament coming up this week. Hello, Chris. Welcome back.
Yes, I'd like to take this moment to announce that Susan Hero is making her pro wrestling debut at West Coast this week. John, thank you so much for having me.
You've got a very busy week coming up, and we are going to chat about all of it. But West Coast Pro, they have the West Coast Cup coming up Thursday and Friday night. And from what I understand, it'll be airing live on YouTube and then after the fact on IWTV. Do I have my information correct?
You got your information correct. Yes, it's our first time trying live streaming on YouTube, and we thought it was worth the shot.
So you have two nights here, and this is a very impressive lineup. Speedball Mike Bailey, Kevin Blackwood, Alan Angels, Brian Keith, who continues to get a lot of buzz behind his name. What do you kind of look at when putting together a tournament and kind of the interesting mixing and matching that you can do with talents? What kind of goes into who you want in, who you want showcased, and balancing out a card like this?
Man, I just love tournaments, right? They're a good 1 night, 2 night tournament, not necessarily the ones that are over a period of, a month or so, but there's just something special about it. I love every wrestling match is its own story. But when you can have 2-3 matches in a row with a story that is just continuing on, and just the creativity of the wrestlers involved, just the matchups, just the possibilities. I love it very much. And this actually hasn't been announced yet. And I guess people, with the show starting tomorrow, I think they've figured it out. But as per my request as West Coast Pro matchmaker, the brackets are blind. The fans aren't going to know, the wrestlers aren't going to know who they're facing in the following rounds. So I just like that element of surprise, especially that night too, when an entrant comes out and you're like, oh man, I wonder who they're going to face, and you just kind of start, as the night goes on, you start going, okay, he's wrestled there, and you start to put the pieces together. I really love that atmosphere. So just tournaments are just so fun. There's so many possibilities, and just the talent. Gosh, it's the lineup speaks for itself. And the cool thing is you have some names. Susan is attacking me right now. Come on.
Susan wants to get her 2 cents in here on the tournament coming up this week as well.
You just have some people that are the fans are really familiar with, and you have some that the local fans may be very familiar with, but the worldwide fans aren't quite up on. So that's a good thing about a tournament. You kind of get to spread things out a little bit. Like, for instance, Starboy Charlie, homegrown hero. He's been wrestling since he was about 12 years old, right? That's crazy to even say, but he's facing Derek Dillinger from Ohio, from the AIW promotion, and it's his first time on the West Coast, and he's got his work cut out for him because he's got somebody that the fans just love and adore and have seen like literally grow up, right? You've got Bounty Brian Keith taking on Sean Legacy, a guy from the southern area who has made a name for himself recently in pro wrestling. Noah, right? So you get those two. You have Vinny Massaro against JT Thorne. JT Thorne is the first graduate of the West Coast Pro Dojo, so it's teacher versus student. You have Max the Impaler and Shigehiro Irie. Like that's like
very cool combo.
Godzilla, Mecha Godzilla come to life. I'm really excited about that one. Jay Malachi is making his West Coast debut as well. He's taking on Viento, a luchador from the NorCal area. Speedball Mike Bailey, right? He's been like everybody's MVP for like the last 2 years. And he's wrestling a local wrestler named Surza, who has just come back from an excursion in New Zealand, training at the Fale Dojo and such. Blackwood and Alan Angels, they're a team, right? So they're facing off in the first round. So we'll have to see how that goes, right? Alpha Zoe, another local hard hitter, up against one called Manders, a hard hitter. He's a Cornhusker, right? He's from Iowa, I believe. So it's just a little bit of everything. Do I have all the matches there? Is that all of them?
And then we have a non-tournament match, Johnny Robbie
Yes.
against Brooke Havoc as
Mhm,
well on
mhm.
that first
And
night.
then also the main event will be Masha Slamovich against Takumi Iroha for the West Coast Pro Women's Championship. So got a little bit of everything. I'm really excited. And I'm just excited for people to just continue to get to know these wrestlers and just, let them, capture their imagination. So,
So since we have last spoken with you, and maybe you can speak a bit about your decision as well. You're now full time as well with AEW. Can you tell us just a bit about balancing, especially for a week like this, where you've got 2 nights in San Francisco and then Collision is Saturday night? Is this a rather ambitious week for you coming up travel wise?
yeah, it is. But I just have to dust them off. And it's a normal travel week for me, maybe in 2016, but a little bit different now. Um, when I talked to AEW about coming in for a couple shows and coaching slash producing, it's the same thing. Agenting, it's the same thing, just a different name. I was very specific in like certain compromises I didn't want to make. Right, I've been putting this time and effort into West Coast Pro, and they've also been, giving their time to me and allowing me to kind of play around with things and work with stuff. So the last thing I wanted to do was put 3-4 months of work into West Coast Pro and then see you guys. So they were understanding, and anytime there's a West Coast Pro show, I'm not going to miss it unless, there's some kind of an emergency. So this situation is interesting because I live in Charlotte. AEW's in Greensboro on Saturday. If they weren't in Greensboro, I wouldn't do the show. I would just stay on West Coast another day. But I figure I might as well. It's an hour and a half drive from my house. It'd be kind of silly to miss that show. But if it was, somewhere else in the country, that was a little bit more difficult to get to. I'm gonna night 2 of the Cup. I go straight to the airport and red eye home, and I get home at like 8 a.m. and then I get back on the road at 11 a.m. So it's going to be, I'm going to be a little fatigued on Saturday.
What's the difference like for you where you are in this producing role for West Coast Pro, and for a lot of the talents, it's maybe, this is their big break. It's like they're probably in the first maybe year or two of their development, and then you're kind of shifting that quickly to, Collision, where you're working with people with a lot more experience. It's just a different dynamic. Does it require two very different skill sets, or is this largely, listen, this is just taking from all my experiences and it's not as big of adjustment as it might be from the outside looking in?
Well, it's been very beneficial for me because the sporadic nature of it, of what matches I might get and who I might work with. And, it's not always spelled out beforehand. So stuff gets thrown to you on the fly. So it's very good for me to be able to adapt and adjust. And the way producing works is every talent is just a little bit different, right? So there's some people who are just have, tons and tons of experience and knowledge and whatsoever. So they might not need as much guidance, right? They may just be like, hey, this is what we're thinking. And then, what do you think? Or maybe not even what do you think? Like, that's up to me to kind of be assertive and go, maybe this, maybe that, whatever. But there's some people where you really don't have to do anything. And then there's others where it's more interactive, where you're kind of sitting with them, listening to them and making a suggestion here or there. Because the thing about AEW, the experience level is all over the place. You have people there that have been in the business 30 plus years. You have some people that are in their first 2-3 years in wrestling. So it's there's no like universal way to coach there, to produce there. And the way West Coast works, there's just a lot of younger talent, and I'm taking the experience that I have at AEW, and that it's just making me do a better job when I'm back in San Francisco working with everybody there. So it's just yeah, it's been very beneficial for me, and it'll be beneficial for the people I've worked with.
And for the time being, are you exclusive on Collision at this point? Or like Saturdays sort of like that's earmarked for you? Is it up in the air if you'll be utilized elsewhere?
I wouldn't say exclusive, but it's maybe how can I explain this? Like maybe a more emphasis on Saturdays because it's a
Mhm.
brand new show and they need extra people. So I think I was kind of brought in with that in mind, but I've done a little bit of everything. I've done pay-per-views, I've done Rampage, I've done Dynamite. So, and I
Got it.
know, maybe there'll be a week or two that I'll miss a Collision and I'll make it up on a Dynamite here or
I
there. Or
see.
maybe I'll do, I think next month there's a stretch where I've got like Dynamite, Collision, Dynamite, Collision. So there's no rule. It's kind of ever changing.
And will you be going to England later this month?
I'm still waiting to hear on that. My fingers are crossed though.
Well, you have an
Yeah.
extensive history when it comes to the British wrestling scene, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the recent passing of exotic Adrian Street, and
Mm.
somebody that I am sure you have studied, and just some of your overall thoughts on Adrian Street as we were all kind of reflecting on his career, and it's a very in depth one.
Yeah, one of the last trips I had for NXT UK, they had brought him in, and
Right.
he was there for about a week at the UK Performance Center. So we got to, sit around with him and talk with him and ask him questions and let him kind of observe and, because modern wrestling is a bit of a culture shock for wrestlers in their 70s.
Yes.
So it was really interesting to see just his eyes kind of light up at some of these big productions, and they put together a really nice documentary on him that's just a great introduction if you're unfamiliar with him, and just something that's kind of fun just um in like the common room at the UK PC we put on the network, and we were going through, I think, some Mid South and watching him wrestle Terry Taylor, and Linda was with him
Yeah.
at the Performance Center, and she's also with him on in the matches. So it's funny to sit with a talent like that and watch them, reminisce over their old stuff. We'd do that with Johnny Saint too. John would be there, and we'd pull up, some of his old matches or old matches from France, and it's just a really God, it's not a once in a lifetime opportunity, but it's up there. It's just really special to spend time with these people that have just, put years, they put their lives into the business. And a lot of it is just was never recorded or never taken note of. So it's just really, really a pleasure for us to be able to share that time with them. And a fond memory that I have of Adrian Street was they wanted to get some footage of him getting in the ring.
Yeah.
And they put him up against Flash Morgan Webster, and he was bending him and twisting him, and it was pretty amusing. Maybe not so much for Flash Morgan Webster's clavicle, but it was a lot of fun.
You mentioned it being like a culture shock for those in their 70s looking at modern wrestling. How about like the other way around from like the modern generation? And I'm sure you were around people that were seeing Adrian Street for the first time as well, and sort of what they're learning from. We're all connected from this one industry, but it's you go by the different generations, and that it's probably a culture shock the other way too.
100%. And I'm still getting used to the modern generation and their blind spots when it comes to wrestling history. So somebody like Adrian Street, I'm like, oh, okay. I know him because of the Apter magazines and the pictures from George Napolitano. And like, I did not see video of him until I was older and getting videotapes. Right. So I didn't have the privilege to watch him when he was live wrestling. Um, so I can understand if a current wrestler had not heard of him or wasn't familiar with him or whatever. But when it's uh or when it's somebody like a Brad Armstrong or gosh, who are some other ones? It's you don't want to hold it against them for not knowing these people, right? Like a Bobby Eaton. Bobby Eaton passes away, and he's revered within the business as being one of the best, just in-ring guys, just a solid, incredible talent. Um, but there's a lot of people that aren't familiar with him, and wrestling is just so expansive now. It's just there's so much of it. It's everywhere, right? And you can look up anything from any time. So I think what is it? The scarcity mindset, right? So like when I was coming in, it's like, I got to get this tape, I got to get this one, I got to get this one, I got it, whatever. I got to get it. And then you'd watch the tapes until they'd wear out, pretty much, right? You stick them in the rewinder, pop them back out, right? Oh, they're broken. Shoot. But now the mindset isn't quite the same. So I don't know. I think every talent just has to find their own connection with wrestlers from the past, and it's kind of it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming to go, hey, here's just the last 30 years of WWE, right? But what about the last 120 years of pro wrestling? What about um, wrestling in France in the 50s and 60s, which has kind of become a thing online in the last few years? What about lucha in the 80s? What about the different companies in Japan? Like, how many companies in Japan can you name? Right. So it's really overwhelming. So there has to be, I wish there was a better delivery system for people to kind of get their foot in the door and learn things incrementally, because everything's out there. You just don't know where the hell to start. So you have someone that like Adrian Street that comes in and people are like, wow, that's crazy. But is it going to be the impetus for them to look further and look into his career and go on Cage Match and see what territories he worked in, or look at some photos of him? So it's interesting.
My last question here, because you do have a flight to catch, and this is a bit of a philosophical question, but I'd be remiss not to throw out some philosophy at you. Something that it's certainly not like a recent trend, but it's one that to me continues to grow and grow, and that as we see the the level of matches, it escalates, and part and parcel, like there's a danger quotient with a lot of it, and I feel like of this modern fan base, there's a growing percentage that I think they have like a deep concern for these performers as human beings and the safety involved as well. Do you sense that? And where do you kind of see it when it comes to the artists in the ring and what they are performing, and the fans almost having like a protect yourselves mentality? That, I mean, in one sense, like I think in another generation, there was not that same level of care that now fans see these as individuals and the toll that can come with this.
Well, I will say for one, I'm concerned for their health and well-being a lot of the time. There's stuff that I see that I'm just like, "Oh my god, that's terrifying." Um, but there's just something interesting about pro wrestling because it's the illusion is that we're wrecking our bodies, right? And the reality is we're wrecking our bodies, but in a different way, right?
Mhm.
So there can be moves that I've seen. I'm a 25-year pro, just about, and I've watched a lot of wrestling. And I can see something and be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe," and I'll reach out to the person and they'll be like, "It was fine. It was perfectly fine."
Mhm.
You're like, "Huh." So it's really hard to tell. There's some things that are very obvious, but there's just some that you just can't really tell. And there are other things where a forearm gets broken, an ankle gets broken, a a tendon, a ligament just gets tweaked just the right way, or someone takes a missile drop kick and they bang their head and they get knocked out, right? So there are just some very basic things that are everything we do is dangerous. That's just the bottom line. Every single thing we do is dangerous. From going to lock up with someone, the ring can give and you can blow your knee out. I've seen it a couple times. It's very sad. I've seen people knocked out on lockups. You lock up real hard, bonk heads, one person goes down, right? But some of these head drivery type maneuvers, some of them are absolutely as dangerous as they look, and then some of them aren't, right? And how do you tell? How do you tell what's what? So whenever it's someone that I have any type of connection with and I, see something, I will reach out to them and be like, "Hey, are you okay? Just checking." And then sometimes I'll see something little and reach out and be like, "Hey, how's your ankle on that? Whatever." And they might be out 3 months on a dive that they catch that looks routine, and then they just roll their ankle on the way down. So, um, I can understand people being concerned because they see the after effects of all the crazy chair shots to the head, all the dangerous stunts. Um, but gosh, it's just so hard. If you go in watching something like this, sometimes you're just gonna have to I don't know, you just have to turn your brain off a
You
little
can't
bit.
bubble wrap at the same time. Like
Yeah,
people, they
because
understand what this is. Yes.
yeah, the risk has to be high for the reward to be high. That doesn't always apply, but you can only achieve a certain pinnacle, a certain reaction if everything is aligned. And sometimes it's a death defying stunt or just some crazy physicality that gets you there emotionally as a fan. So, I think they maybe overly police just a little bit, but I don't see our job is to get people to care about us. So they're caring about us. It's just when it becomes a huge talking point and it's days and people are laboring over it, that's when it gets to be a bit much. But there's nothing wrong with caring about us, because for the longest time people didn't, and we were expendable. And a concussion in the beginning of the match, you better not stop the match, you better keep going. We got time to fill. So now it's a little bit different, and I think that's a good thing.
I agree. I appreciate the answer a lot. Again, everyone, West Coast Pro, Thursday and Friday night, it will be live on YouTube. Simply go search for West Coast Pro on YouTube. You can also follow them, WC Pro Official on Twitter. And then the replay will be up on independentwrestling.tv. And the busy man here, Chris Hero, you also have a Zoominar coming up in the near future. So let everybody know. I will vouch, if you have the opportunity to pick this man's brain. You usually need a lot more than 20 minutes. I was impressed. We could.
Yeah. We've done pretty good so far. So in cooperation with the gentleman by the name of Chris Brooker, I'll be holding a Zoominar. And that is a seminar via Zoom. He's had these before with Nigel McGuinness, Kevin Kelly, and I'll be the first pro wrestler to do it. So I'm very excited about that. Tuesday, August 15th. It's based in the UK, so it'll be 8 p.m. UK time, 3 p.m. Eastern. This is open to wrestlers from all over the world, any experience level, whether you're a wrestler, a referee, an announcer, a commentator, a booker, a producer, anything like that. Let's just talk. I love doing seminars where I kind of get to know a little bit about everybody, and then I kind of get to try to troubleshoot and figure out what you may be looking for, and hopefully I can give that to you. So I have a tweet I just tweeted right before this interview, so if you go to that tweet, it's got all the pertinent information. It's got a link there. I'm really excited about it. I don't travel as much as I used to, so I'm not getting out to a lot of different places, so this is a chance for me to interact with people from all over. And yeah, West Coast Cup, shoot me some tweets. Let me know who you want to win, predict who you think is going to win. I'm really, really excited to be a part of this. I'm really thankful for West Coast Pro for giving me this opportunity.
Yes, and they've also got that huge 5-year anniversary show coming up in October.
Yeah.
So don't be a stranger. We'd love to chat again, maybe closer to that show. And all the best with the travels this week.
Sunday, September 10th, we have our debut in Los Angeles. So that'll be our September date. And then October 14th, I believe it is. That'll be a Saturday. So we got to, every month we've got some kind of a weekend, something hot cooking up. At the September 10th show, we've got Manami Toyota coming in to make an appearance. So that's kind of cool.
You have it.
Kobashi in October, but you got Manami. All right. Manami's there in September.
These are some pretty big appearances you guys have coming up over the next couple of months. So Chris, thanks a lot for fitting us in today. We were happy to chat with you, and all the best this weekend and beyond. It's always great to speak with you.
John, I appreciate it so much. We're going to have to get you out to San Francisco show sometime.
I'm down. I would love to make it out to a West Coast Pro show at some point. So thanks very much, Chris. And we'll do this again sometime.
All right. Thank you all. Take care.